All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first grade Iowa Financial Literacy and Economic Standards webinar. We're excited to have you. My name is Kyle Osborne. Just want to kick it off with some housekeeping items. As we go through the presentation, there's going to be a chat feature in the upper left. And so if you have questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. At the end, we'll go over some of those questions. And also, if you don't have questions, which sometimes you don't, feel free to write those down on a piece of paper and ask our presenter for today any specific things that you really need help with, or if you have specific questions for your classroom, please send those Vicky's way. So today's presentation is going to be recorded. There's going to be a PowerPoint presentation that is accompanying it. So if you're wondering, should I keep notes this whole time? The answer is yes and no, but all of your notes will be provided later on. So as we advance to our next slide, I want to introduce our presenter for today. Vicky's been a great friend when it comes to the economic and financial literacy space. It's been fun to partner with her. Currently, she is the director of the Dordt College Center for Economic Education. A little background about Vicky is she's brokered cotton. She's been in office management. She's been a leader in the nonprofit space. She's owned her own business, and currently she gets to lead the charge at Dordt College for financial and economic literacy. So I'm excited for you to meet her today. She comes with a wealth of information and just knowledge, and I'm excited that she's going to be doing our first grade standards. So Vicky, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Kyle. What a kind introduction. It's great to be with you guys all this afternoon, and we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. And as we start covering these standards, for first grade, this is specific to the first grade standards. The first three standards are all somewhat related and can be taught kind of in a group. And so I've lumped them all together, and I will introduce some of the resources as we go here. The first standard is 1.11, compare the goods and services that people in the local community produce with those that are produced in other communities. So we have goods and services that kids need to understand, community, and production. Number 1.12, explain why people in one country trade goods and services with people in other countries. And you can see here we have the goods and services again, and we've added trade and other countries. And then 1.13, explain why people have different jobs in the community. The community theme is echoed here, and the jobs, of course, are related to the goods and services that are produced, as we saw in 1.11. So here's a little description of some of the vocabulary words that kids will need to understand. We have included definitions for them here, and also for the goods and services, there are short videos attached to the PowerPoint that you can upload if you want to show them to this class or just review it yourself. As we go through these standards, I think it's easiest to start with the jobs, what people do. And so we're going to, first of all, look at the website on the top left here. It's a website from Scholastic Community Club, and there are 8 different jobs featured on this website. Each of them, when opened, has language that's very simple for a first grader to read if they're at a reading ability at this point. And if they can't read for themselves, there's also a listen button, so they can click listen and the sentence will be read for them, to them. So very simple, goes through 8 different jobs, just a very interactive way to introduce kids to different types of jobs in the community, many of which they're probably familiar with, but it's also a fun tie-in to the ELA, helping the kids to read. For a math tie-in, we have a lesson plan on the right side of the screen, and this one involves also different jobs that people do, but it's linked to a survey and a graphing exercise. When the kids click the survey button, numbers automatically populate the different jobs listed on the side, and then the kids can go to the next screen and make the bar graph reflect those numbers. So the numbers are different each time, and the kids learn how to click and drag the bar graphs so it matches. Great tie-in as they're studying with the different occupations that are available. And then finally on this one, we have the right job for the tortoise and the hare. A little bit different take on this story, and suggesting that they each have jobs to do, and that's why their skills are different than each other. So a few things there for jobs. There are a wealth of resources on the internet for different ways to introduce kids to jobs and work, employment, whatever term you decide to use for it. And we've listed some of those links in the PowerPoint as well, so you can access them when you get the PowerPoint later. Here's a couple other things that we've included. Neighborhood Spy is an activity that actually involves, gets the family involved. And so it starts to help kids understand what goods and services are produced with those jobs, and gets a conversation started with the families and the teacher, the classroom as well. Basically, it's an exploring walk, and you just walk through the community and discover different things that are produced or serviced in the community. This is also a great place if you do a unit on community helpers. This is a great place to plug in the different jobs and another way to meet the same standards. So if you have pictures of community places and community helpers, matching games are always fun. Encourage the students to match the person with the place of employment. For example, a fireman would be in a firehouse, a baker would be in the bakery. Just a little way to enforce or use as an assessment. On the other side of the screen, Bear About Town and City Mouse, Country Mouse. Two fun books. Bear About Town is, students will see a few places that Bear visits, which may also be places in their town. And in City Mouse, Country Mouse, the mice visit each other's location and discover a variety of differences in their two places where they live. So if we have jobs and they're producing goods and services, and we've explored those things, the next step would be to teach about trade. When you produce something, what do you do with the extras if you produce more than you can use? And this is where trading comes in. On this slide, we show you an activity from Crayola about trade route timelines and how to map out trade routes. Their example uses the Silk Road trade route, which if you're studying Asia, that would be a great one. If you're studying different parts of history or different parts of the world, trade routes can be traced on maps in a variety of ways. It should be fairly easy to adapt this to other trade routes. For example, trading across the continent or the country of the United States as the wagon trains moved across, or trading between England and the United States at the beginning when our country was first being populated by white people. To help with this, we've also included maps showing the US and world imports and exports. There's a variety of maps in this link, and that will help your students understand what some of the main things that our country produces and exports, and also what some of the things that other countries produce that we import, and what's imported and exported between other countries as well. Great visuals to help first grade students be able to see in their mind what happens with those extra goods. And then a fun lesson here using a painting by Norman Rockwell. It's called The Curiosity Shop. And this lesson digs into the idea behind trading money for goods or services. And sometimes when we talk about trade, we only think about trading goods for goods. And this includes services and also money as part of that trade. Okay, continuing with the trade activities here, National Geographic, of course, has a great lesson and activity about trade during the colonial days. And it's geared toward young children, so it's very appropriate for a first grade classroom. In Sheep in a Shop and Ox Cart Man. Sheep in a Shop, the sheep go shopping, and it's a rather chaotic adventure preparing for a birthday party. They barter or trade their wool to pay the bill for the supplies that they need for the birthday party. And so there you get more into the bartering and trading. And then Ox Cart Man goes through the whole cycle of producing and marketing goods. He gathers and produces all throughout the year, and at the end of the year, he goes into the big city and sells the items he has and uses that money to purchase other things that he needs that he can't produce. So both classic books and fun reads for a first grade classroom. Okay, those resources should cover those first three standards quite nicely. And let's move on to the next one, 1.14. Explain why something borrowed must be returned. And the key word here, of course, is borrowing. We've talked about trading and bartering, producing, consuming. But what if you borrow something? Kids need to understand that borrowing means you're going to return it. And Country Bear's Good Neighbor is a wonderful book to teach that. Bear borrows and borrows and borrows, and the people that he's borrowing from get a little tired of it and don't understand what he's up to. Eventually, he makes a cake with the things that he's borrowed and shares it with them. But it's a good way to explore some of the feelings behind borrowing and what is expected when somebody borrows. Even young children can understand that when you borrow something, you do expect to get it back. The book that Jake borrowed goes into a little more of how to treat something that has been borrowed. In this book, Jake borrows a book from the library, and it gets a little bit dirty, and Jake has to figure out how to get himself out of that predicament. And so it's a good springboard for talking about how to treat the things that we borrow. For the teachers, there's a link to a website called Etiquette of Borrowing. Just gives some talking points about borrowing and some of the concepts that could be brought out in a discussion about borrowing. And of course, The Borrowers by Mary Norton. Classic book, lots of fun, great read aloud for a first grade classroom. Could also launch into a discussion of the difference between borrowing and stealing, and talking about the fact that when you borrow, you give it back, but stealing is taking it without permission and without intending to give it back. And finally, 1.15, describe the role of financial institutions in the community in order to save and invest. A lot of big words in there. Basically, they're talking about banks. So the key words for kids: finance, save, and invest. Financial institutions are simply institutions that handle money in one way or another. And at the first grade level, pretty much banking is what they're going to understand. Berenstain Bears' Trouble with Money is a good story about the Berenstain Bears and their how they spend their money and the fact that they don't have money. And Berenstain Bears, of course, are always good read-alouds. This one, we've included a lesson plan as well as a video that will read the standards to the kids. In Dollars and Cents, brother and sister learn about managing their money, including a checking account. So with Trouble with Money, they learn savings. Dollars and Cents, they learn checking. Both occur at the bank and are good introductions for first graders to the bank. And in There's No Business Like Bank Business, there's a lesson plan included there, but also a student role play. It might be beyond some first graders, but for those who are well advanced, we thought we'd include it anyway. Something maybe to challenge your students with, or assign to an older group of students to come and perform for your students. Okay, in case you want to look for your own resources, we've given you some helpful hints here and some links. We start with Econ EdLink whenever we're looking for a resource for a classroom. There are hundreds of free resources at Econ EdLink. It's econedlink.org, and you could search by resource type. If you want a video, or if you want a lesson plan, or whatever it is you're looking for. You can also search by grade level, just to enter whatever grade you're intending to teach, or you can search by subject. And so for these lessons, I could easily type in banking, for example, and come up with resources related to banking for first grade. In FedMatch, this is very interactive. It's a matching game. Again, it's all words, so the students will have to know how to read somewhat, but some first grade classes are able to do that. And this is a good matching game from the Federal Reserve that will help students learn the basic terminology used with money and banking. Words like account, and they can learn to match those and become more familiar with that terminology. And then finally, Hands-On Banking is a free curriculum that covers a lot of the personal finance skills that students need. And specifically for these standards, there's a lesson number 2 begins a section on what banks do, and obviously very appropriate to the standards for first graders that the state of Iowa has developed. Okay. We also publish a newsletter every month, and in this newsletter, we share ideas, activities, lessons, things that we've found throughout the month, and we share 2 of them for the younger grades, 2 for the middle grades, and 2 for the high school. And then at the bottom, we also include a helpful hint for teachers, maybe a webinar link or a site where you can get more information about a certain topic, different conferences that are available, that sort of thing. And if you would like to receive this, it's an emailed newsletter. And if you'd like to receive it, simply email me, vicki.vermeer@dort.edu, as indicated on the slide. And just let me know. I'd like to have the newsletter delivered to me each month. It's very short, it's very hands-on, and easy to implement, and we try to find the best resources for you. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to send me an email. Now I'd like to stop for a moment to ask some questions and remind everyone to take the short survey at the end of this presentation. And while we wait for questions, I'll just show you the sponsors for this webinar. You've met Kyle from the TS Institute, and there's also Bob Mantell from the Iowa Council on Economic Education, and myself from the Dordt College Center for Economic Education. So thank you for being with us, and we'd like to take any questions that you have at this point.
Yeah, one question, Vicki, is as you went through those different resources, about how long does each resource take, would you say?
There's quite a variety of different lengths. Most of them are 15 minutes to 20 minutes. Reading a book, it depends too on how much dialogue and conversation you have around it, but just simply reading the book can be done in just a few minutes. A little bit of follow-up, 20 minutes, and you're done with it.
Great. And then just to follow up on the standards with the resources, each standard or each resource that you talked about today definitely covers each standard, correct?
Yes. We have aligned them all to make sure that what the standard's getting at and what the resource teaches are the same.
Great. I know that's a big discussion point with educators and their administrators, making sure what they do in the classroom accomplishes what is being required.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep. We've gone through all of the resources ourselves and made sure that what they teach is getting at the heart of what the standard requires.
Great. So be assured, educators, these are going to be great resources. Well, that is all the questions that we have today, Vicki. I want to thank you for your time and thank you everybody who joined us today. And again, we will be sending out the slides and the recording. And just to reiterate what Vicki said, please reach out to her if you have questions, resources, sign up for the newsletter, and then also do the evaluation because there will be some gift cards as a winning, somebody can win. So thanks everybody for coming, and thank you, Vicki, for your time.
My pleasure.